Hey you guys, this is Josh.
And Carolyn.
With Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought.
Today we are out in the little food forest we have started in the front yard, and we're going to be answering your questions.
All right, well, before we answer your questions, we always do a little chit chat, catch up on what's going on around Riverbend, which is our homestead. And so what's up? What's going on this week?
Ooh, can I tell them our secret?
You know, you're going to tell. All right,
we filmed this video early because we're going on vacation. Josh and I have been working really hard this spring, and so we're actually getting away, and we're getting away even without children, which is a special treat for us. Grandma and Grandpa are stepping in and running the homestead, and we're going to get away. And you know, this is a great discussion for homesteaders, is when do you get away from the homestead?
There's always something to do, and you really do, just like any other occupation and any other form of work, you really need to get a break sometimes.
You do. Yeah, you need to get away, and especially on a homestead where there are just so many things to do all the time.
Yep.
You know, your work is looking at you all the time, so it's hard to rest, even if you try to take an easy day. So we found that sometimes the month of June is a great time for us to get away. We've done all of our main planting, but we're not into harvest season, at least not real strongly yet.
Yeah,
so
we've got a little lull right here.
Yeah.
And it lines up with our anniversary.
Ah, anniversary. How long have we been married?
18 years.
18 years this year?
I believe so, yep.
Wait a second. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
18. I know, I think somewhere we said 19 accidentally not too long ago. But 2002.
Okay,
good. 18 years.
Wow, it's been a long, long time.
And she still puts up with me.
Aw, that's wonderful. It'll be fun to get away with you. So.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And no, we're not telling you where we're going. We're keeping it a secret. All righty.
All right.
So today is a Q&A.
So we'll get right into that.
Yeah, we'll get right into the questions. So first question from Fertile Homestead. I like that name. On milk animals on the homestead, video we did not too long ago. What supplies do you need and the cost associated with those supplies? Well, that's that could be a pretty big topic, but
thing's crawling on me.
yeah, that's a healthy garden.
It is, yeah. So yeah, the supplies we need for a milk animal.
Right. So let's just real quick cover the obvious. But you need a milk cow.
Yep.
You need a place to keep a milk cow. Got to have that down first.
Of course, you need the basic animal supplies like waters and feed.
Right.
All of that sort of thing.
Minerals and salt and all those for taking care of the cow. And I think more though this question's geared toward milking the cow and what do you need to be dealing with the milk from the cow.
Okay, so that kind of is going to depend on if you're going to hand milk or machine milk.
Right.
But if you're going to machine milk, you do need a milking machine, obviously. And either way, you do need some good stainless steel buckets.
You do, and we're going to really recommend getting started for one cow. We've always hand milked. We did machine milk once, and unless you're going to buy a really expensive setup that has a very easy cleaning system, the supplies and the system that we're going to describe to you here really quick are really much easier than dealing with a machine overall for one cow.
For one cow, we found that it was actually faster to hand milk and deal with the milk most of the time and the cleanup than it was to machine milk and then deal with cleaning the machine on top of dealing with the milk.
So you need some stainless steel buckets that are adequate for the amount of milk your cow is going to be providing.
Yes, so you need to know a couple gallons, 3-4 gallons. If you get into buckets that are much bigger than 2 gallons, they get really heavy, and you might want to consider having multiple 2.5-3 gallon buckets that can hold about 2 gallons of milk each rather than one large bucket.
Yeah, that's a good way to go. We do milk in about a 4-gallon one right now. We get about 3 gallons per milking right now. And that works pretty good.
Yeah, it is a heavy bucket.
It is heavy, and it's hard to pour, so we often pour off into a smaller one to then pour into the jars.
Right.
You also need a cleaning bucket. We just use another stainless steel bucket that you're using for washing the cow's udders and teats.
And to do that, you also need a collection of clean cloths.
Yep.
Something that is dedicated just towards washing the udder of your animal and the teats before you milk.
Right. We just use, like, what are they? They've got to be like 10-inch by 10-inch white cloths.
I think they're called bar wipes, technically, is the
like
type that we use.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you need some basic cleaning supplies. We use vinegar and a little bit of dish soap.
To actually wash the udder, so you need to have that on hand.
You also need a dedicated brush for cleaning your milking buckets.
Yes.
That is only used in the buckets that you put milk in, nothing else.
And the inside of the bucket and the handle and the rim, and that's all that you want to use that for. Nothing that's going to touch any barnyard muck.
And it needs to be a non-wire brush. You don't want to use a wire brush in there. Some people,
you'll scratch.
One of our kids accidentally a couple times have tried to wash it out with a wire scrubby. You don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we have a horsehair one that works really well.
Yeah.
It's really good, but it needs to be dedicated for that bucket.
Yeah. And then you would wash the outside of your bucket with something else, probably a rag and dish soap for that.
Yep.
So, and then you need milk filters. You need to be able to filter your milk into your storage containers. We use half-gallon jars as our storage containers. Some people use gallon jars, but they're hard for little children to pour without making a mess, so we use the half-gallon. And so you'll need a funnel, a wide mouth funnel, and milk filters to go into that. And there's a whole range of options that you can use, from the reusable coffee filters that you can use to pour your milk through, to different like butter muslin filters, to just the paper disposable filters.
Right, but you can buy those in bulk. They're not real expensive.
Yeah, they're not too expensive.
And we've played with a lot, and really just a wide mouth funnel.
Yeah.
And those paper filters?
The paper filters,
is really what works best for us.
Yeah, so that kind of setup, really your jars are the most expensive to get enough jars for the setup.
One more you got to think about.
Yep.
You need a dedicated fridge, probably.
You may be bringing in a huge amount of milk.
We bring in 6 gallons a day, roughly, right now. And sometimes it's higher. Yeah. And it's often lower in the later season, but you have a lot coming in every day, and you're probably not going to consume that every day.
So you need a dedicated space in a refrigerator in order to build up your supply, so you're not having to make cheese every day just to be able to store the next day's milking.
Right. And so we've got to kind of keep this short so we can get through questions. Though that's a real simple setup for what you need for milking a cow. And it's not very expensive on that end. That's probably the least expensive. She asked about cost. I couldn't tell you at the top of our head, but that's one of the least expensive ways to go. It's a pretty simple way to go. And of course, from there, depending on making butter, cheese, that's a whole nother set of supplies.
Right, exactly.
It depends on where you're going to go with things.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty, let's see here. Sabrina Luke on planting our garden, I think that says, and growing our family.
Okay.
I love the stick used for seed planting. Does it have measurements on it?
That is actually a yardstick.
Yep.
I love using yardsticks out in the garden. It's just really easy. I don't mind taking a permanent marker and marking my planting spacings right on them. Yep. And you know, they cost a few cents a piece, so I get a handful of them at the hardware store, and we just use those all over the place.
Cool.
Yeah.
Alrighty, Charisse Faber, I'm not sure, on Wildcraft and Make Your Own Arnica Oil says, how do you store your arnica oil afterwards? I was considering freezing it, but not sure if that will affect the potency. Otherwise, just in the fridge?
You know, arnica oil is shelf stable. So if you've made it properly, you have no problem just storing it in a cool, preferably dark cabinet in your house. Okay. If you want it to go a little bit longer, the refrigerator's fine. Personally, I wouldn't bother with freezing it. You really do want to have a fresh batch, make a fresh batch every year just to keep it potent.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Cassandra Kelsch on the top 5 canning mistakes. She says, so I just barely canned some homemade soup and hamburger last week, left the rings on and stored them in my basement. Would you suggest throwing all those out?
Okay, Cassandra's referring to the fact that she left her rings on for storage, which can potentially give you what's called a false seal. Cassandra, no, I would not throw those out as long as you followed safe canning methods. I would go down and remove the rings right now, and then just be really sure when you go to use those jars that the lid's on really well. If you have to pry that lid off and you hear that suction sound, a lot of times if you're looking at the food in your jars, you can actually see it suck up when you open your jar, then you know that you have a true, really good seal. The problem comes in is when people aren't really paying attention and they open their jars and don't really realize that it wasn't sealed on there very well. It was just kind of sitting on there and sucked on lightly. So just make sure that your seal is on there really well when you go to open those jars, and you should be fine.
Okay. Michelle Walters on strategies for extending the garden harvest. With the additional family, are you having to put in additional produce to provide additional food? And we would have a hard time providing all of our food.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm talking about veggies here. We provide a lot, probably 70% right now. We've done a little more at times. We're still building the fertility in this garden. And yes, we are extending the space and are working to enlarge our production, but that takes time, so little bits at a time. We're also working to more align what we have with our growing environment and storage methods, which helps us produce and use more as well.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of strategy there.
Hey, can I answer one that somebody asked on a video? I don't think we have it on this list.
Sure,
the other day.
you bet.
The other day, I think you were in the hoop house. I can't remember what video that was, maybe on the transplanting video, and you mentioned something about needing to feed 10 people on the homestead. And they said, what did I miss? 10 people on the homestead.
No.
I think you just estimated, because there are 11
It's actually 11 in our household. There's actually 13 on the homestead, though we are sending some food their way, but they also do their own shopping a bit.
Right, exactly. So anyways, just wanted to tell you, we didn't lose a child.
It's actually 12 right now.
There is 12 because we have a nephew staying with us for the summer right now.
And I mean, that's a minimum. We regularly have anywhere from 12 to 15, sometimes 20 people around to feed. So there's a lot happening here. Alrighty, Nancy B on strategies for extending the garden harvest asks, what is the point of planting seeds close together and then thinning later? Why not just plant seeds at the spacing the plant will need? Well, there's a couple reasons for that, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
So one of those is your germination rates are generally not 100%. You don't know. And so a lot of things, corn's a good one, beans, just a lot of seeds you often will plant more and then thin them as you go. Yeah. And that just makes sure that you're getting good coverage. Now, if you're buying good quality seeds, we have found that that's a pretty small problem. Even when I see germination rates of 80%, I feel like we're usually getting 90 to 95%. Yeah. But you don't get 100%. So that allows you to make sure, because usually by the time you know you've lost the planting window, that you can still get a harvest from.
Yeah.
So that's one reason.
Yeah.
Another is extending the harvest, right?
Yeah.
We do that with some of the root crops. We've got a row of carrots and beets right now.
And we'll go through and we'll thin out every other one and have baby carrots.
Right.
And make room for the in-between carrots to grow more. So that essentially gives you 2 harvests from the same crop.
And you're harvesting at a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one more, and I do this a lot, and that is with planting lettuces and leafy greens. Some people like to grow microgreens. There's different levels all the way to growing full heads of lettuce. I have found that growing full heads of lettuce for us, one, it's a shallow harvest window.
Yes.
And 2, there's more work for you in the kitchen. You love it when the greens can just come in,
clean,
and maybe chop them a little bit and they're ready to go. No washing necessary. So we plant very densely, and we will harvest in the beginning in a microgreen fashion. And that opens it up, allows things to get a little bit bigger, and we'll thin them out again. And that again extends the harvest all the way to where those plants are maturing. So but instead of waiting for 6 to 8 weeks, for a larger harvest, we can harvest babies, get a harvest more early on, and you extend that harvest, and that works really, really well.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to add 2 different ones to that, though.
Okay.
which is the old saying that says, one for the blackbird, one for the crow, one for the cutworm, and one to grow. So you're decreasing your chances of losing a harvest when you have a little bit more seed if you have some pests out there that might want your seed too, or your seedlings. But then another one is that some gardeners believe, especially for the larger, deeper planted seeds, that the combined force of seeds sprouting together helps those seeds to get out of the ground. And if you think about something like a pumpkin that rots in the field and then goes to sprout the next year, there are a bunch of seeds all in one clump in that circumstance. And they come up and that combined force helps them get out of the ground well. So some people believe that you're really going to get your seeds off to the best start if you start with multiple sprouting together and then you thin them out.
Very good. Absolutely right. Okay. Kelly Hardy on strategies for extending the garden harvest. Can you talk about perennials more, and do you have a watering system? So yes, we can and we will be over time. We're doing a lot with perennials here and developing some perennial systems, and it is an essential part of our garden. We're sitting in what is becoming one of our first food forests. The trees were here when we got here, and we are developing a multi-dimensional, multi-level food forest, and we'll talk about that in the future.
And those have perennials in them.
Those
are made out of
predominantly perennial system, as are most of our fruits and nuts and herb gardens. So just as a short, we will be discussing those more. They're a major part of the garden and the property and a resilient homestead.
And the reason for that really quickly is that as your perennials mature, you put in less work for the amount of harvest that you get. You have plants that just come back every year and they start getting more mature and they're able to produce without a lot of input from you or as much as an annual garden. So you have a garden then that is producing with less work on your side. So it's kind of like the retirement program on the homestead, right? You put in the work early, get them up and going, and then eventually you have less work as those perennials take over.
They also provide a lot of benefits in adding dimension to the landscape, which provides for wildlife, provides for birds, provides for pollinators. There's a whole lot of value. So even on a very small holding, perennial systems are very, very important. Luke's coming by to say hi. And do we have a watering system? You know, I have played with a lot of watering systems over the years. Most of them have been very basic, and I am just moving to a little more formal, I wouldn't say automated system, but something better than overhead sprinkling or flood irrigating, the different things that we've done. I think I will talk more about that this summer. And got something I'm excited about. I just want to use it for a while before I talk about it too much. Absolutely.
Good idea.
Okay, another planting your garden question from Ian Amis Ferry. What is your garden size? You know, I've struggled with that question more and more because while we do have one very linear garden, we're gardening all over the place. So we have about 100 by 100 area, so roughly a quarter acre that we call our main crop garden. But even that has a lot of perennials in it. It's got strawberries, asparagus, raspberries, grapes, gooseberries, currants. It's got a tree nursery in it, the greenhouse in it. I actually eventually hope to turn that into just an overall main crop garden, mostly for annuals, and start to spread the perennials around and even extend that. But we also have trees, little bits of garden around that. We've got the cottage garden out here that Carolyn's not only growing herbs and culinary herbs and medicinal herbs in, but also some annual vegetables in. We've got lettuce beds around there. We've got vertical gardens.
We're going to have food growing all over the place.
We've just done some terracing that is going to be a mix of more annual garden and perennial garden. So we've probably got a solid acre under cultivation, you know, of some sort. Or developing it into that without any pasturing or some of the more broader systems.
Now you just used the term main crop garden, and I know we throw that around a lot, but I don't know that we've actually really defined what we mean by a main crop garden or the main garden.
So let me back up a little bit. In designing permaculture systems, we try to zone and we try to place things in their area based on their use and proximity to your home, to where you're moving in and out of. And so the things that have more regular intensive use multiple times a day, you want closer to the home. And then as that use diminishes, we might move that farther away. And so while we talk a lot about Carolyn's cottage garden or herb garden, really it's a kitchen garden, meaning it's as close to the kitchen as possible. And most of those things are there because we want very close access to them. For one reason or another, you're going to be in that garden a whole lot.
Yeah.
The main crop garden generally has things that might have batches of harvesting, and you're going to be in it regularly, but it's not right out your kitchen door. It's a little further off. It's going to have more of your crops that have, one to a few major harvests over the year instead of everyday harvests.
So really the main crop garden is really the garden where we're migrating all the things that we're preserving, kind of doing a big preserving day on or a couple preserving days on, so that we can put them up kind of in bulk all at the same time.
Right.
Versus the kitchen garden or the cottage garden is more for, what we're going to go out and grab to have for dinner that night or for lunch or, to be eating fresh during the season.
Courtney Dill on how to plant tomato starts asks, what do you do to support your tomatoes? Will you stake them after they've grown some more? We've tried a lot of different ways with tomatoes, and I really, really like the hog panels, and especially doing the bean tunnel tomato trellis that we do. And I did a video on that not too long ago, and that is a great way to go. In the case of having them in the hoop house, we're going to string them up to the top of the hoop house and let them string up and give that a try. I haven't quite done it that way, but they do that a lot in larger market garden hoop house ways of growing tomatoes and cucumbers.
So let me go backwards just a second and say, you said you like doing it in the cattle panels.
If you don't have to do a hoop house and you're just trellising them.
Okay, so if you watch our video on the bean tunnel / tomato trellis, you'll see that what we do is we take cattle panels, which are the wire woven fence.
They're a hard wire fence.
And we bend them over to make a tunnel. And then you can take the tomatoes, and as they're growing, you actually weave them into the fence to create a support system for it. And that has become just a great solid support for it. But we can't do it with the hoop house because there's plastic on it, and you don't want those tomatoes actually touching that hot plastic.
Yeah, they would burn.
Yeah. So
would not be good for them.
there you go.
Okay, Carolyn Callahan on early summer garden tour. Is there a difference between your onions, one to eat off now and one for storage? You can answer that one.
Yeah, so there are different varieties of onions, and some are much better for storage than others are. So we have several different keeping and storage varieties, and then I think we have about one fresh eating variety. Even the reds and the whites that we have this year are noted to be good keeping varieties. We do so much storage that we try to really weight everything towards that keeper variety and the storage variety, because the thing is, you can still eat them fresh and they taste great even if they're a variety that's meant for keeping. So just make sure you look at the description on your varieties to know what it's best for.
Very good. Diana Davis on clabbered milk asks, my question is, can I preserve a small amount of clabbered milk and save it for my next batch of raw milk?
It depends on how long you're looking to preserve that little bit of clabbered milk. But clabbered milk will sit in the refrigerator if it's well clabbered for several months very nicely if it's in a clean and lidded jar. So you only need a few tablespoons to inoculate the next batch of raw milk, and so that's a good way to go for a couple of months. Some of the good bacteria and yeasts will die off in the freezer if you put it in there, but some will survive. So you can do that if that's your only option, and you will get a little bit of a jump start on your next batch of clabbered milk.
Okay. Kim Bell on how we put up 1,400 pounds of chicken in a day.
Oh, that was
That's a wild video. If you haven't seen that, check it out. That was last year. And was wondering, when we butcher our chickens, they've always been frozen. But this go round we were wanting to can about 24 quarts. When butchering, you can at this time? So when you're butchering, do you can it then, or can you put it somewhere cold for 24 hours first?
Okay, you can do either of those.
Right.
You can either can them immediately, and we will do that. We'll take the first few chickens that come down the line, cut the meat off of them, and put them right into jars and get the canner going right there. If you've read the Ball recommendations for canning, it talks about chilling your meat thoroughly first. And I actually spoke with the head of the Idaho Master Preservers Department here, the Ag Extension, and she said the only reason for that recommendation is if you're field dressing game. So if you're preserving something at home and it's going straight into a jar, that is fine. You do not need to pre-chill it. On the other hand, you can chill it for
Right.
24 hours just fine and then get to canning.
And that might be a good idea, because as you're processing chickens, there's a system you need, and it's a lot of work. And so while we do that, it is a whole extra system.
It is.
And you really need to plan that in and just make sure that's going to fit in for you. If not, then chill them, do it the next day. That's a good way to go too.
We have, though, it's a great thing if you can work it out to can while you're butchering. We've been able to can up to 40 jars, quart jars of chicken while we are butchering. I just set up the camp stove and the canner real
Yep.
close by and go that way.
And especially if you're working in a group and you've got a good team, that really makes that doable, and you can make good, efficient use of your time.
Yep.
All right, I've gotten this question a bit lately. Steve Unrain on how to plant tomato starts asked, Josh, what type of clamps are you using to hold the sheeting to the cattle fence, the panels?
Okay.
And so we've got those cattle panels. We've then taken some hoop house plastic over it, and I had to rig a way to hold that down on the ends because I didn't really want to get real technical with a fancy door or anything, trying to do it on low budget. And Steve, I don't really know what they're called. They were at the hardware store in the tarp section for clamping tarps down. And they're just a little plastic clamp that has a little slide deal that helps it lock on. And so I would just go to the tarp section and see what they have. And I kind of knew when I went in they'd have something, and that's what it was. I just don't know exactly what it was called. Regina Winslow on everything you need to know about meat chickens. Another homesteading site I follow said they like to order male meat chickens. Do you order a certain sex, and if so, which one and why?
We usually just get the straight run, but you can get all male. Some people like that because they're going to come up to the, a smaller size faster. So usually people will get those and they'll butcher them a little bit younger as the fryers. It's generally noted that your females are going to make better roasters. However, I think they all taste equally good in the pot, whatever size they're at. So we just get a straight run and go from there.
You do get a little more uniformity.
You do if you want to go with a single sex.
Right.
Yeah.
And but we don't mind that either, because sometimes we're doing different size meals, and so you can get a couple big ones, a small one.
Right.
So it works out just fine.
All right. Maybe better do just one more?
Okay, one more. All right. I think I'm in trouble.
Uh-oh.
Mary Wasaki on everything you need to know about raising meat chickens, except for it's not a meat chicken question.
Okay.
She wants to know, did I forget the promise that I made to Carolyn for Mother's Day?
Uh-oh.
Do you guys know the promise I made to Carolyn for Mother's Day?
Oh, I think I remember.
Do you know the promise I made for Mother's Day?
I do. I'm trying to be patient.
You are.
But it is a busy year, and he'll get to
And it was promised that I would get to it this season.
This season.
Yes.
Yeah.
Carolyn has a beautiful cottage garden there. Most of you have seen that. And on the ends right now, it's just got some hog panels for fencing, because we need to keep dogs and kids and geese and everything out of it for a while. And I promised an arbor and a gate and a little fence. So
I'm really looking forward to it.
and I will live up to my word. It may be at the last minute of the season, before the first snow, but we will get it
But
done.
it'll be in. I believe it.
Absolutely. So
Good, good. Well, it's a good thing because my brand new arbor roses just went in right there, and they're going to need
they're
something
going
to
to need
climb
something to climb on.
on.
All right. Well, it's going to be cool.
That was subtle pressure. Did you see that? Like, not too direct.
Good job. Good job. She's very patient.
Sometimes.
All right, you guys. It has been great hanging with you today. Have a great week, and we will see you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.